Hey all, here are OS Reviews. You're watching our hands-on quick review of the Alcatel OneTouch Pop Icon 2. The name is a mouthful, but this is an interesting device because recently we've been seeing more and more budget-oriented smartphones such as the Ulefone S8 Pro that sells for $80 unlocked. Well, if you consider that budget, then this really takes a cake for being the least expensive new smartphone that you can find on Amazon. I've seen it sell for as low as $16, and right now it's hovering around $25. So if you are on a budget, you're looking for, let's say, a backup phone or something very affordable to take with you, let's say if you're traveling, you don't want to bring something more expensive, then this may be something to consider. So as a sub $25 smartphone, what do you get? Well, actually not too bad specs considering the low price. It includes a 5-inch TFT LCD touchscreen display. There's also a quad-core processor clocked at 1.2 gigahertz. It's probably the Qualcomm 400 or 410 processor, looking at the clock speed there. It also runs on Android 4.4 KitKat, so that definitely is a tad outdated, but it does have all the standard essentials like Wi-Fi, GPS, Bluetooth. Considering that this is the cheapest smartphone you can buy without a contract, the most impressive things are definitely the Qualcomm Snapdragon processor coupled with the 5-inch display. They're better specs than what you typically find. Oftentimes these less expensive devices will use a MediaTek chipset or have a smaller 4.5-inch screen, so this is already something that's pretty comfortable in terms of everyday use. So in here we have a number of pamphlets and instruction manuals from TracFone, which is the prepaid network that's offering this device, and we have just an inner compartment that includes the phone right on top. We'll be taking a closer look in a moment. Down below here we have the battery cover, and it's made out of a soft touch rubber material that gives it a nice grip and texture. Alcatel, of course, is an OEM that's based in China, but what's interesting is here they mostly produce low-cost budget phones like this. But a few days ago, we also saw a flagship-level device from them by form of the Idol 4S, which runs on Windows 10 Mobile and has a Snapdragon 820 processor. It's a flagship leveled phone, also quite affordable. So they have good budget value for the money. So we also have a charger inside here that says Alcatel, USB based, in addition to a micro USB cable for charging and syncing. So setting this off to the side, taking a look just at the phone now. First impressions, this is actually a lot heavier than what you'd think, considering it is a all-plastic phone. There's considerable heft to the device. It's definitely not hollow feeling. Now the battery inside here, as you can see, is sealed. Even though the cover can be removed, you can't hot swap the battery pack, which is also kind of interesting. There's a speaker on the bottom here, and there's also a pre-installed SIM card. There's also the 5-megapixel camera, which has a protective film covering it. Below it is an LED flash. On the other side, there's a micro SD card slot, and it supports cards up to 64 gigs. I believe there's going to be 8 gigs of built-in storage. Centered on the very top is also the 3.5mm headphone jack, always nice to see, and on the very bottom there's the micro USB port for charging. We can peel back this protective tape, and we have access to capacitive keys on the very bottom of the phone, which are designed, as always, in this kind of cartoonish like font that Alcatel seems to always put on most of their phones. There are 3 types of input methods pre-installed, including voice search, Google keyboard, and swipe. And after setting up Wi-Fi and location services, we can launch into the UI. So as you can see here, we have a pretty heavily skinned version of Android by Alcatel. I've gone ahead and changed the wallpaper just by tapping on settings on the main screen, going into wallpaper, and then taking a look at the gallery. You can see there's a wide selection of photos which are all custom. They've been designed by Alcatel, and they're definitely different from standard or a stock install of Google Android. The same thing can be said about the entire software experience, but before we get too deep into that, I want to do a quick size comparison of the hardware. So this is the phone next to a Nexus 4, which has a 4.6-inch screen. Again, this one has 5 inches, so not too bad. It's a pretty average sized device. I think 5 inches hits a fairly good sweet spot as a device that still has an older 16:9 aspect ratio. One of its closest competitors in terms of processing power would probably be the ZTE Symbol T, which we also did a hands-on review on just a few days ago. But this one's street price is higher than the Alcatel just because it has that novel form factor design, which people are paying a bit more of a premium to get. In addition, it has a slightly weaker Snapdragon 210 processor compared to the 400 or 410. So this one should run a little bit faster in terms of actual benchmarks. So I think for the vast majority of consumers that just want a more traditional looking smartphone, this might actually be a better buy. So going back into the software now, it's completely different from stock Android. First of all, there's gestures, so you can double tap to wake, which is kind of borrowed from more expensive phones, such as on LG's devices, for instance. The lock screen is also quite different. I can tap and hold to unlock, or I can slide over on the edge. If I drag over from the other side, however, it will launch into the camera app automatically. So the camera interface is actually quite simple, but there's a lot of tweaking and customization going on. Notably, if I go into settings, there's the ability for me to even scan QR codes directly in the camera app. I think this is actually a pretty neat trick because you can scan business cards, you can scan products in the store without having to download, let's say, a separate barcode scanner to locate more information. You can also toggle into panorama as well as HDR, night vision modes, etc. However, the performance of the camera is definitely nothing to write home about. In fact, it's probably one of the weaker cameras I've seen of late. However, it's relatively quick to focus as well as to capture an image since the processor manages to keep up with the simple processing tasks without too many issues. Taking a look at some outdoor shots, this first one was captured using HDR. I can zoom in. You can see that colors look decent when you have good lighting environments, but there's just not a lot of detail or textures there just because there's not a lot of pixels to work with. But overall, again, it produces fairly acceptable looking images, especially if you are using it outdoors in good lighting environments. And this next image was just captured using the regular auto mode without using HDR. There's no optical image stabilization, of course, so you have to hold relatively still to capture your shots. Again, another indoor shot, this time again capturing a fair amount of detail. If I look closely, I can see the dust particles on this plant without too many issues, and colors are pretty realistic in this shot with good lighting environments. But once the lights dim down, you can definitely see a lot more artifacting as well as not quite as impressive looking images. However, the LED flash does a respectable job when you are in the dark. So overall, again, camera is definitely usable. You can share your images to social media without any problems. It's just, I think that within the same category, I've seen better cameras, especially recently, than the one on this phone. Definitely not its main selling point. All right, so next we can take a look at some other extras on here, and there are a lot of apps built on in just because Alcatel, it seems like, is going for the same approach as LG and Samsung, which is basically throwing the entire kitchen sink in and letting you decide what features you want to use and which ones you want to simply ignore. It's a little bit annoying because it takes up a lot of extra space in terms of the phone's internal storage. With that being said, there are a few utilities which are actually somewhat helpful, including a built-in compass. So yes, there is a compass sensor built onto the phone's hardware. Again, very impressive at the super low price point of $25, and it actually works reasonably well. This also helps it produce somewhat better results when you're using it as a GPS device using Google Maps. Speaking of, you have all the standard Google utilities on board as well in a separate folder, and that includes YouTube, access to Chrome browser, Google Drive, Google Maps, and all the standard services. You can see some of these custom transitions happening as well, but for the most part, the phone remains snappy and smooth in the general UI navigation. We also have some separate folders that they've crafted for us, including one for productivity, notes, as well as assistance, social, so Facebook and Twitter are pre-installed in addition to additional tools that we have on board. All of these apps, including even the time or the clock app, has been redesigned by Alcatel, and they're not using the standard Google based app. So there's a lot of work going on, but whether it's really paid off depends on whether you're an Android purist or not. However, I think that first-time smartphone users should find it still to be a reasonably smooth as well as easy to use experience. So some things I want to quickly point out. Now, if I dim the lights over here and tap on the capacitive keys down below, you can see they are backlit, so that is a nice addition. Otherwise, the screen is decent as far as brightness is concerned, but it's a pretty typical TFT LCD panel, which is to say colors can seem a little bit muted if you are used to, let's say, a more expensive AMOLED panel. The biggest problem, I would say, would probably be viewing angles. It's not bad if you're looking at it head on or from the left or from the right, but if you're looking at it from the top down, such as, let's say, if you're holding the phone like this, you can see how the colors very quickly degrade, especially from the top. Overall speaker quality is slightly better than expected just because it packs more volume than I thought, coming from a small mono unit located on the back of the device. It still gets pretty easily muffled up and distorts at higher volumes. In addition, bass is not its strongest suit, but for casual music listening, for streaming YouTube videos and Netflix, it does a pretty decent job. You can also use Bluetooth or headphones, of course, if you want to improve on the audio quality. So now we're trying the web browsing. We are opening up Chrome, and this is the New York Times. It is a mobile version, but you can see that everything is rendered pretty well. It's easy to read and easy to scroll without too much stuttering or delays. Of course, if you load the full desktop version, it will take slightly longer just because, again, this is by no means a flagship level phone, but the Snapdragon 400 processor is a fairly tried and tested chipset, even if it's an aging one, but it still handles these pages without too many issues. And I can also long hold on the settings key here to bring up my multitasking drawer. Again, it's vertically scrolling. It's quite different in terms of layout, and if I don't want an app, I can flick it up to close it up. Overall, it works well, but it's not my favorite layout. I do prefer something that gives me more apps at a glance, or maybe even a scrolling one that's vertical, just because you can't tell how many apps you have open until you scroll all the way back. It just takes a little bit longer to close out specific apps using this particular layout that Alcatel has chosen. Battery life of the Idol Pop 2 is actually pretty good as expected, since Snapdragon 400 is a very energy efficient chipset. It should last you for about 2 days of continuous use before you need to recharge it again, especially with a lower res screen like this. Call quality is also quite good, although the microphone does sound a little bit tinny when you are in louder environments, just because there isn't any noise cancellation on board, and as a result, again, if you are, let's say, at an airport, it may struggle a little bit more. Overall though, reception quality is good. I consistently received about 3 to 4 bars in the Seattle region. Same thing goes with Wi-Fi. The connection seems to be quite strong. So that's more or less our hands-on review of the Alcatel OneTouch Pop Icon LTE 2. Overall, I would say for only $25, you're getting a lot of phone for not a lot of cash. The construction quality, despite being all plastic, is a lot more solid than I was expecting. It really does have a good heft to it. And the overall design as well as the user experience are all colorful. It's fairly consistent, and performance is not bad at all for this really ultra budget category. I would say that areas of improvement would include maybe an IPS panel. If you're willing to shell out maybe $10 more, you can get a smartphone that has maybe a slightly better screen in terms of viewing angles, but this one does have a pretty large 5-inch size. Overall, it's an incredible value for the money, and proof that, again, smartphones, even budget ones, are getting better and better as we head into 2018 and beyond. So you can check out more details about this in the links down below, but for now, this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been the Alcatel OneTouch Pop LTE 2.